Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, April 16th, 2020, and today I want to talk to you guys about the 2020 Senate election in the state of North Carolina. So I recently made a video about the state of Arizona and their Senate race, and pretty much just discussed the optics for the 2020 Senate race. North Carolina has a very interesting one that isn't getting a lot of media attention. North Carolina, traditionally a Republican state, is almost certainly going to be competitive this time around. There's a number of indicators that Democrats are actually going to do a little bit better in North Carolina than we might expect. The last time there was a Senate election during a presidential election year was actually 2016, in which the Republicans won the Senate election. But the last time there was a midterm election, obviously 2014, the election right before this one, in which Senator Thom Tillis defeated incumbent Senator Kay Hagan, who was first elected in 2008. So traditionally, North Carolina incumbents do not have the best re-election rate. Amongst Republicans, I believe the 2016 Senate election was the first time North Carolina re-elected a Republican senator. So just taking a look, I'm going to make sure that my mic is actually all the way up, so it is. So that's good. I didn't want it to be soft, I just realized that. But just looking at the Senate election, let's go ahead and take a rundown of previous Senate elections in North Carolina. So the last time a Democrat actually won in North Carolina was the 2008 Senate election, in which Senator Elizabeth Dole, a Republican incumbent who is related to Bob Dole, who ran his 1996 election campaign, she actually was not reelected. She lost by a pretty substantial margin. Obama did not win by as large of a margin. Obama's margin in North Carolina was 0.3% compared to this margin, which is borderline 9%. And when we take a look at the results here, this is probably the largest margin of victory we will see for a Democrat statewide, especially in a Senate election. Kay Hagan, with the whole push for President Obama nationwide, soared to victory as a Democrat from a pretty traditionally Republican state. 2008 was the last time North Carolina went for a Democrat. Before, I think the last time then it went for a Democrat was either Jimmy Carter or slightly before that. But North Carolina, again, we all know it as a Republican state. In 2020, it's expected to be a Republican state as well. When we look at the primary turnout, definitely a huge indicator that there was going to be a pretty substantial Democratic turnout. I mean, I would definitely say the Democratic primary was a little bit more contested, which thus the reason for higher turnout, but it still was something that aligned with the actual results. And throughout the entire campaign, there was a number of polls administered. By the end of the campaign, generally, Kay Hagan took ahead. But it was a pretty substantial margin, the fact that Kay Hagan actually won by almost 10%. This was a Republican state, and the Democrats were, at the time, nearing 60 Senate seats. I think they ended up with 59 to 41, or 58 to 42, but it was a huge margin for the Democrats in the United States Senate. So 2016 was the last time a presidential election year coincided with the Senate election here. Richard Burr was actually reelected. I believe, besides Richard Burr, there had been no other Republicans reelected. I remember seeing some type of statement about that. I know it wasn't any Republican, but I think Richard Burr may have been the only one who actually won re-election. Just taking a look at previous polling data, I mean, it went back and forth up until election time period where it actually started solidifying, I guess. Oh, actually, no, it didn't. That's weird because I distinctly remember making a video about it. Not a video about it, going through the Senate elections back then and then comparing it to the 2018 House results because they were drastically different. But that's weird. Okay, I guess Deborah Ross was ahead. But taking a look at the Senate election results, I mean, it was a pretty substantial margin for Richard Burr. He outperformed Donald Trump, and that's not one thing that many Republicans did in a number of these states. Sure, some traditionally Republican states such as Arizona or Georgia, we might have seen better margins for incumbent Republicans, but at North Carolina, Richard Burr outperformed Donald Trump. Not by a lot, but definitely did above the majority mark. And the thing that I was going to mention was the 2018 House elections. This was when the Democrats had a full-fledged force in the state of North Carolina. In 2016, it was not a pretty large margin for the Republicans, but it was still a substantial enough margin. In 2018, it wasn't at all, I mean, a large margin. The only reason the Republicans won here was because the 3rd district was uncontested by the Democrats. That was the sole reason. They did not put up a Democrat in 2018. If they had, that 30% of the Democratic vote would have put the Democrats over the top in terms of the popular vote percentage. So just looking at the numbers here. The reason why it's 9-3, by the way, is because the 9th district was contested. That one was resolved. Democrats ended up losing it, even though they came very close in this election. But the Democrats increased in North Carolina. I mean, with that 3rd district added in, they would have won statewide, and it definitely would have been a showing to Republicans. And the fact that there were only 3 seats for the Democrats and 9 for the Republicans after this election, despite being practically 50-50, goes to show how gerrymandering actually does exist and how much it takes an effect on the population, because House of Representative seats definitely should be reflecting the population, but that's besides the point. So Thom Tillis, what's a little bit about him? Well, he doesn't necessarily have a high approval rating or a high disapproval rating either. 29% of voters are undecided or do not have an opinion of Senator Tillis. I think that's not going to be a positive thing. I really think that in the day and age of Trump, we're seeing Democrats just fully, I guess, compare these senators to Donald Trump, and if Trump isn't doing too well in the state itself, I honestly don't think that Thom Tillis will outperform Donald Trump. The thing about the 2016 election, a lot of Republicans were scared of Hillary Clinton getting into office. Now a lot of those same Republicans that were never Trumpers but ended up voting for Trump are a lot more inclined to vote for someone like Joe Biden. In fact, approval rating polls say it all. Joe Biden has a much larger approval rating than Hillary Clinton did at this time period, I think by 13%, and that just shows how either unpopular Hillary Clinton was or how popular Joe Biden is now. But when we're talking about a pretty strong Democratic candidate nationwide, that's not going to help, obviously, the Republicans do any better. And when we take a look at the overall fundraising right now, generally Thom Tillis is outperforming the Democrats in fundraising. So that is the one thing that I would say the Democrats have a disadvantage at. Typically, if you look at Arizona, or if you look at Montana, or if you look at a number of other races, the Democrats are outperforming the Republicans on fundraising. That's not the case in North Carolina. But North Carolina, I don't think is being discussed enough by the GOP and by the mainstream media to a point where it is really possible that the Democrats do end up winning there. The 2016 governor election went for a Democrat, Roy Cooper, and it was an extremely close race, but Roy Cooper actually ended up being a mildly popular Democratic governor who's up for re-election in 2020. In fact, he looks like he's going to win his seat yet again for another 4-year term. And that's only going to help Democrats down ballot. I don't think that Donald Trump is going to help Republicans down ballot. This is not 2016. There isn't an incumbent Barack Obama that North Carolina didn't already, that already rejected in 2012. We're talking about a president who isn't necessarily super popular in North Carolina and a senator who doesn't necessarily have the most name recognition despite being a senator from North Carolina, and the Democrats with a pretty substantial force behind them leading into the 2020 election. But again, North Carolina is still probably going to end up in the in the Republican column. North Carolina is not one of the major states that needs to flip in order for the Democrats to win. I mean, they can go through the route where they take Montana and they take Arizona and they somehow get a Georgia Senate seat, but North Carolina doesn't seem like it's too likely to go for the Democrats in the Senate election, but there is a real possibility that it actually does. I'm not discounting it whatsoever. So I think a lot of people should definitely go ahead and take a look at the Senate election here. I think that comparing it to the 2016 polling data, it definitely looks a little bit better for Democrats, but typically Republicans outperform the polling. If we look, Donald Trump only led by 0.8%, and the Republicans ended up winning, obviously, by 3.6%. That could have just been a combination with a bad Democratic candidate, but at the same time, though Cunningham is narrowly leading by the polling numbers of 0.3%, I don't think that the Democrats could be too sure of anything in North Carolina. There is a real possibility the Democrats will win here. It's not out of the question. I'm thinking maybe a 30-40% chance, but obviously that leaves 67-60% chance for the Republicans to win there. But it's definitely not absolute yet. So I think as this race progresses, as more attention from the Biden campaign goes to North Carolina, I really think that this race could become a lot more competitive as the 2016 race was. But at the end of the day, I do think at this point in time, the Republicans will end up winning the state of North Carolina in the Senate election. Now, it is going to be close, but on both the presidential level and the Senate level, I do think that the Republicans will take it away. But things definitely can change. I'm going to end up covering, I think, the Maine Senate election next because I think that one will be very, very interesting. I think if you guys have any specific states that you want me to cover, governor's races as well, I think that you guys should comment that down below. I definitely would go ahead and read all the comments. And I think that it's really important that you guys actually tell me what type of videos that you want me to watch. That way I don't do anything that you guys don't want to see. But Maine's probably up next. Probably after that, we could take a look at the Rust Belt. But so far I've done Arizona and North Carolina, and I'll probably put these in a folder in case you guys want to watch the rest of them. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.